The air in the crow's hideout was thick with tension, the weight of their last mission pressing down on them like an unseen specter. The dim candlelight flickered against the damp, crumbling walls, casting elongated shadows over the makeshift table where the crew gathered. The scent of burnt oil and old parchment lingered in the space, a reminder of the secrets they kept and the risks they took. Rabbit Foot sat with his hands folded, his usually casual demeanor replaced with quiet concern. "The Dimmer sisters," he muttered, glancing at the others. "There's talk about them expanding. Pushing out into new districts." His voice carried a hint of unease, the rare sound of a man seeing something dangerous on the horizon. "They're not just creeping in anymore. They're making moves." Jack, ever the opportunist, leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "We knew they wouldn't stay in their little haunted house forever." He tapped a finger on the wooden surface, considering the implications. "But that's not our biggest concern right now. The Church of Assumption is still ripe for the taking. And we've got Jim Bob working in the shadows over there, making sure things go our way." His eyes swept the room, gauging reactions. Harry, arms crossed, was less enthused. "You think a few well-placed bribes and a knife in the dark is going to let us run a church? You're playing a long game here, Jack. That crowd's got faith, and faith makes men desperate." Jack smirked, tilting his head toward him. "Faith makes them stupid. And stupidity makes them easy to control." Rabbit Foot exhaled through his nose, unconvinced. "We barely made it out of that place last time. The last thing we need is a righteous mob coming down on us." Jack waved him off. "We'll keep it clean. Let them pray, let them weep, let them give to the poor. As long as we're the ones holding the purse strings, they can worship however they damn well please." He stretched, rolling his shoulders before standing. "I need air." He grabbed his coat from the back of his chair, letting it settle over his shoulders with an easy confidence. "Try not to start another war while I'm gone." The night air was sharp and unforgiving, the ever-present mist of Doskvol clinging to the stone streets like a second skin. Jack took a deep breath, the cold settling in his lungs, grounding him. The city was never truly quiet, but there was a rhythm to its noise, the distant hum of factories, the occasional echo of boots on cobblestone. Which was why the sound near the bins caught his attention. A faint shuffling. A low muttering. The kind of noise that didn't belong. Jack's hand instinctively hovered near his knife, his eyes narrowing as he stepped toward the alley. He stopped short, unwilling to take the risk alone. Instead, he turned on his heel and headed back inside. "Harlequina," he called, his tone calm but insistent. She looked up from where she sat, sharpening a thin, curved dagger. Her mismatched eyes glinted with curiosity. "What?" Jack jerked his chin toward the door. "Something's in our bins. Might be nothing. Might be something. Get your dog." Harlequina grinned, a gleam of excitement lighting up her face. With a sharp whistle, her trained hound, a beast of muscle and scars, rose from its resting place, ears perked, waiting for the command. "Go find it," she murmured. The dog bounded forward, silent as a shadow, disappearing around the corner. A moment later, a startled yelp rang out, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone, being dragged. Jack and Harlequina stepped into the alley just as the hound emerged, its jaws locked around the ankle of an old, balding man, his tattered coat dragging in the dirt as he scrambled weakly to escape. Jack's stomach twisted in recognition. The man's gaunt face, streaked with grime, was unmistakable, even beneath the filth and despair. Governor Cross Daava. Inside, the room was filled with an uneasy silence. Daava sat slumped in a chair, his fingers trembling as he wiped at his mouth. His once pristine clothes were torn and stained, his skin waxy and pale. The crows surrounded him. Jack leaned against the table, arms crossed. Rabbit Foot stood with his hands behind his back, watching with cool detachment. Harry sat on the edge of a desk, silent but calculating. Harlequina, still grinning, crouched in front of Daava, her hound sitting at her side, licking its chops. Rabbit was the first to break the silence. "You mind telling us why the governor of Doskvol is rummaging through our trash?" Daava exhaled shakily, running a hand through what little hair he had left. "You," he swallowed, looking between them. "You don't read the papers?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "Let's assume we don't give a damn." Daava let out a nervous chuckle, though it held no real humor. "The election," he said, voice hoarse. "My re-election is in 3 days." He took another breath, hands shaking. "Every other competitor?" "Gone. Disappeared. No bodies. No explanations. It's just me, and Marik Ishtar." A slow silence spread through the room. Harlequina's grin widened. "That's a damn shame," she said, voice dripping with mock sympathy. Daava turned to her, eyes wide, desperate. "You don't understand. Ishtar is killing them. I know it. I barely escaped my own home, there were men outside my window, waiting for me to sleep." His breath hitched. "I know what you are. I know the things you do. You don't care about loyalty or honor, just results." Jack tilted his head. "That's not an insult." Daava swallowed. "I need to disappear. Fake my death. Get me out of Doskvol before Ishtar finds me. I'll pay. Whatever you want." A quiet moment passed. Rabbit Foot exhaled slowly. "We can't let Ishtar win." Harry nodded. "If he takes office, he'll own this city. He'll have the police, the courts, the treasury, he'll be untouchable. And we'll be first on his list." Jack glanced at Rabbit, something unreadable in his expression. "Then we make sure he doesn't win." The plan came together in an instant. They wouldn't take Daava's money. They wouldn't smuggle him out of the city. Instead, they'd use him as bait. Lure Ishtar into a public attack. Expose him. Ruin him. Destroy his campaign before it even reached the finish line. Jack smiled at Daava, his voice smooth, reassuring. "We'll help you fake your death." Daava exhaled in relief, shoulders sagging. He didn't notice the glances the crows exchanged behind his back, he didn't realize that his survival was never part of the plan. The plan was set. The crows had played this game long enough to know the rules: bait, lure, expose, and survive. Cross Daava's escape had been whispered to the right ears, and the promise of a public ambush was all but guaranteed. They would drive him out of town in an obvious attempt at escape, a plump piece of bait dangling in front of Marik Ishtar's relentless grip. Rabbit Foot took the reins, his hands steady on the leather straps as the carriage rattled over the worn cobblestone road. Inside, beneath the thin wooden panels, Daava sat hidden in the cramped space, flanked by Jack, who wore a near-perfect imitation of the governor's tattered clothes and nervous demeanor. The deception had to hold, at least for a little while. Harry rode ahead, his horse's hooves kicking up loose dirt as he moved a few paces forward. Behind, Harlequina kept to the shadows of the road, trailing them at a safe distance, her hound running silent beside her. For the first hour, the road stretched before them without trouble. Then, just as Harry crested the next bend, his stomach clenched at the sight ahead, a police checkpoint. The largest gathering of law enforcement he had seen in weeks. Guards, too many of them, stationed at the road, stopping every carriage, every pedestrian. Their eyes were hungry. Searching. Harry knew this was for them. His mind raced. This was too early. Too soon. But his instincts kicked in, the same ones that had been sharpened by months of running cons, escaping trouble, and fighting for his life. He pulled his horse's reins slightly, just enough to prepare for what came next. He leaned down to Chupeda's ear. "Time to put on a show, girl." In a single motion, Harry released control of the reins and sent a small spark of energy into the horse's muscles. The reaction was instant. Chupita reared back violently, letting out a blood-curdling whinny before bolting forward at a terrifying speed. Harry jerked in the saddle, twisting and flailing his arms as though desperately trying to control the rampaging beast. The checkpoint exploded into chaos. Guards leaped to the side as Chupita tore through the checkpoint, sending crates tumbling, smashing barrels, and nearly toppling an entire weapons rack. The lead officer shouted orders, but it was too late. The attention of every single lawman was on Harry. "Help! She's out of control," he screamed, making sure his voice cracked with just enough fear to sell it. He yanked the reins left, forcing Chupita into a sharp turn that nearly sent him flying. The horse skidded, kicking up mud and dust as guards rushed to grab at the reins, struggling to restrain the panicked beast. Harry could see it, just in the corner of his eye, the carriage slipping past the checkpoint, Rabbit keeping his head low as he guided it forward, the wheels rolling over the cobblestone smooth and silent. Rabbit Foot smirked to himself. "That damn kid. He really knows how to cause a scene now." He had met Harry when the boy was just a skittish nobody, fresh out of whatever quiet, dull life he had come from. Back then, he could barely hold his own in a game of dice, let alone a fight. But now he was playing the city like a fiddle, spinning chaos and fortune in equal measure. Rabbit kept driving, never looking back. He didn't need to. He knew Harry would get away. They regrouped just beyond the checkpoint, the sky growing darker as they neared the bridge from the Brightstone district to the Lost district. The air here shifted, the bright city streets behind them giving way to abandoned ruins, overgrown alleyways, and the ghosts of a city long past its prime. Then Rabbit saw it, a carriage pulled to the side of the road, its rear axle split clean in two. A group of men stood around it, arguing in hushed tones, their hands gesturing toward the damaged wheel. Rabbit's fingers twitched. Luck had always been a strange thing with him. When the moment came to make a choice, he always felt it, like a tug deep in his gut. This was one of those moments. He pulled the carriage to a slow stop. Inside, Daava immediately tensed. His hands gripped his knees as he turned to Jack, his voice low and filled with barely contained panic. "Why are we stopping?" No one said anything about stopping. Jack, dressed in the same ragged clothes as Daava, adjusted his cuffs, his expression unreadable. "Relax, Governor. It's just a broken carriage." Daava shook his head. No. No. This wasn't the plan. We need to keep moving, keep going. This is a mistake. His voice rose in pitch, his nerves breaking through his careful composure. "We shouldn't even be here. I should be halfway out of the city by now." Jack tilted his head slightly, watching him. "And where exactly do you think you're going to run to, Daava? You can't hide in Doskvol. You can't hide anywhere." "I'll find a way," Daava snapped, his eyes darting toward the carriage door. "I can bribe someone. Get on a boat. Anything is better than sitting in this death trap." Jack sighed, stretching his arms lazily as if this conversation bored him. "Here's the problem, Governor, you don't have a plan. You think running off into the night with no resources, no allies, and no idea where you're going is going to save you?" Daava gritted his teeth. "It's better than waiting to be slaughtered like a pig." Jack smiled, leaning in slightly. "No, it's really not. You see, we do have a plan. And unlike you, we actually know how to pull one off." He gestured vaguely outside. "And right now, that plan involves not drawing attention by ignoring people in need of help when we're supposed to be playing the part of good, innocent travelers." Daava exhaled sharply, pressing a hand to his forehead. Jack gave him a pat on the shoulder, his tone mockingly reassuring. "Sit tight. And try not to look like you're planning to bolt the second I turn my back." Outside, Rabbit had already hopped down, rolling his sleeves up as he approached the stranded travelers. "Need a hand?" One of the men, a broad-shouldered fellow with a thick beard, scratched at his chin, nodding toward the broken wheel. "Axle's shot. We were just about to get started on a fix, but an extra set of hands wouldn't hurt." Rabbit grinned. "Lucky for you, I've got two." Harlequina, standing a short distance away, crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. She wasn't fond of delays, and she especially wasn't fond of unplanned social calls. "This is slowing us down," she muttered, her fingers tapping against the hilt of her knife. Harry arrived just as Rabbit set to work, his eyes sweeping over the scene. He took a deep breath, shaking off the last of his adrenaline from his performance at the checkpoint. Then Rabbit saw it. Just for a moment. One of the men, standing slightly apart from the others, moved differently. His clothes weren't quite right, a little too stiff, a little too bulky in all the wrong places. As if something lay hidden beneath the fabric. Armor. Rabbit's instinct flickered, a brief whisper in the back of his mind. But the man simply stood there, watching. Doing nothing. So Rabbit ignored it. The repairs finished, the strangers expressed their gratitude, and soon, the group continued forward, two carriages now rolling side by side, cutting through the deepening night toward whatever fate waited ahead. The road stretched out before them, the shadows of the lost district swallowing the last remnants of Doskvol's civilization behind them. The wind howled low through the shattered ruins, carrying the scent of damp stone and the distant, almost sickly sweetness of rot from the deadlands beyond. Rabbit foot slowed the carriage, rolling it to a halt just before the skeletal remains of what had once been a bridge checkpoint. Jack listened from inside, his fingers tapping against the hidden knife strapped beneath his sleeve. The second carriage had stopped as well. That wasn't good. They were too close now to the ambush point, to the place where this all needed to come to a head. Every second wasted gave Ishtar's men more time to react, more time to realize what was happening. Harlequina's voice carried from outside. "Rabbit, you see that?" she murmured. "Yeah," Rabbit answered, his voice even, measured. They stopped too. Jack closed his eyes, pressing his head back against the wooden wall of the carriage. He could hear Cross Daava's ragged breathing beside him. The man had been getting worse by the hour, his nerves fraying at every stop, at every checkpoint, at every stray glance from some wandering traveler. He was losing himself. Jack had seen it before, the moment where a man's fear started making decisions for him. There was a shuffling of boots outside. Jack stayed quiet, listening. A voice, low and uncertain. "Why'd we stop?" One of the men from the other carriage. Rabbit's answer came smooth, too smooth. "Just taking a moment. Checking the path ahead." "You should keep moving," the man said. There was something off in his tone, like he wasn't just offering advice, like he was testing the waters. "Don't worry about us," Rabbit said. "We'll be right behind you." The man hesitated. Too long. Then another sound, hoofbeats. Another carriage rolling up behind them. Jack's gut twisted. A second carriage meant trouble. A second carriage meant they weren't done with checkpoints. The door to their hiding spot creaked softly as Daava shifted beside him. Jack didn't need to turn his head to know what the man was thinking. He wanted out. "Stay still," Jack murmured. Daava turned to him, his voice a whisper but shaking with barely restrained panic. "We should go. Now. We should get out and run into the woods before they see us." Jack didn't even look at him. "You run, you die." Daava gritted his teeth. "Sitting here is just waiting to be caught." Jack rolled his shoulders, keeping his voice calm. He couldn't let Daava's fear infect him. "You're not thinking straight. Look at them, Daava. They're still talking. That means they don't know what's happening yet." The words barely left his mouth before a sharp whistle split the air outside. A guard's voice. "That's him." That's Cross Daava. Jack froze. Daava's breath hitched. His fingers dug into the seat, his body coiled like a man about to bolt. Jack's mind worked fast. The real Daava was still hidden. They had only seen him. Jack took a slow, measured breath, adjusting his disguise. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't have to be. It just had to work long enough. "Stay put," he said under his breath. Then he stepped out. The air outside hit him like a blade. The gathered guards, 6, maybe 7 of them, had already drawn their weapons, though none had approached yet. The leader, a stocky man in standard issue, had one hand on his sword hilt, the other clenched into a tight, impatient fist. Jack lifted his chin, forcing his breathing to slow, shaping the fear in his chest into something that looked like arrogance. He let his shoulders relax. He let his lips curve, just slightly. "Gentlemen," he drawled. "I'm flattered by the warm welcome." The lead guard's face twisted in contempt. "Save it, Daava. You're coming with us." Jack tilted his head. "Now, why would I do that?" The guard stepped forward, his eyes dark, heavy. "Because Captain Marik Ishtar is already on his way. And once he gets here, this stops being an offer." Jack let out a slow, considering breath. "Ishtar himself?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "Now, that's truly an honor." The guard's patience was wearing thin. Jack could see it. "Push harder." Jack took a step closer, lowering his voice just enough to make the guard lean in, just enough to make him question. "Let's be honest with each other," Jack murmured. "We both know Ishtar doesn't want me in a cell. He wants a corpse. If I go with you now, I don't make it through the night." "You don't make it through the night." The guard's eyes flickered. "Just for a second." Jack kept pushing. "You know who Ishtar is. What he does to the people he doesn't need anymore. You really think he's gonna let you walk away after this?" The guard's jaw tightened. Jack could see the conflict creeping in. Then another voice cut through the air, another guard, standing just far enough away to see Jack slip up. "Wait," the guard's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "He's not wearing restraints." His face darkened. "Why isn't he wearing restraints?" Jack's heartbeat spiked. Too late. The lead guard's eyes sharpened with realization. "He's stalling." The shout went up before Jack could say another word. "Reinforcements. Call the captain, now." Jack moved fast. His hands shot forward, grabbing the lead guard by the front of his uniform and dragging him into the carriage before the others could react. The door slammed shut. Cross Daava stared at him, wide-eyed, as Jack forced the guard onto the seat opposite them. The man struggled for a moment, then froze as Jack pressed the edge of a knife lightly against his ribs. Daava's face had gone pale. "What the hell are you doing?" Jack didn't look at him. His gaze was on the guard. "I'm having a conversation." The guard's breath was shallow, his pulse hammering. "You're dead," he spat. "You don't have a way out of this." Jack sighed, shaking his head. "You people really need to get better at lying." The guard glared at him but said nothing. Jack leaned forward, voice calm. "Too calm. You don't have to die here." The guard didn't move. Jack let the silence hang. Then he leaned in just a little closer. And spoke the truth. "We're trying to protect this poor, cowardly bastard," he said, motioning toward Daava. "And the only thing we need from you is a little silence." The guard hesitated. Jack could feel it. Then, finally, the guard swallowed hard, nodding just once. Jack exhaled, relaxing back in his seat. "Smart man." He reached into his coat, pulling out a small glass bottle, the swirling mist inside shifting like liquid shadow. He turned to Daava. "This place is no longer safe for you, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "We're going back to the hideout." Daava opened his mouth, to argue, to panic, to say something useless, but Jack cut him off with a single look. "Take the bottle. It'll get you both there." Daava took it with trembling fingers. Jack sat back, listening as the air outside grew louder. Ishtar was coming, and he'd be waiting. The air outside was thick with tension, the kind that settled deep into the bones, a stillness before the inevitable storm. Rabbit Foot gripped the reins tightly, his gaze flicking between the guards slowly closing in. He saw their practiced movements, how they spread around the carriage, ensuring no exit was left unattended. His fingers twitched, ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. Then it happened. One of the guards peered through the carriage's slats and froze. His eyes widened in recognition. "That's him," the man barked, turning to his comrades. "That's Cross Daava." Rabbit Foot's stomach clenched. Jack stepped out before anyone could act, slow, deliberate, as if he were simply another weary traveler stretching his legs after a long ride. The others watched as he met the guards head-on, speaking in that easy, confident way of his. Then, in an instant, Jack moved. Before the guards could react, Jack grabbed the nearest one and pulled him inside the carriage, disappearing behind the door in a blur of motion. The stunned silence that followed lasted no more than a breath before chaos erupted. Rabbit didn't hesitate. He cracked the reins, shouting at the horses, forcing them into a full gallop. They lurched forward, the wheels kicking up dirt as they tried to barrel past the encroaching guards. Then he heard it. A pop from inside the carriage. He knew that sound. Jack had used his trinket. Daava was gone. That was it. The only thing left to do was run. But the world had other plans. A voice rose above the chaos, a deep, guttural command spoken in a language none of them recognized. The air shook. Then it exploded. A shockwave tore through the street, flipping the carriage on its side, throwing Rabbit and the others through the air. Wood splintered, horses screamed, and for a terrifying moment, Rabbit knew nothing but the sound of his own heartbeat. He landed hard, his vision spinning. Dust and debris choked the air, and through the haze, he saw him. A man, standing in the wreckage, his cloak billowing around him like a second skin. The source of the voice. Harry, coughing as he pushed himself upright, felt ice crawl down his spine. He had heard of this magic before. The voice of the dragon. Few wielded it, but among them, one name stood out. A bounty hunter, feared across the Imperium. The Dovakian. Harry's fingers tightened into a fist. Before he could warn the others, movement in the distance caught his attention. A group of men stepped through the swirling dust, and at the center of them stood Marik Ishtar himself. Beside him, walking with the casual arrogance of a predator who knew exactly where his prey had landed, was Bruce Walland. For weeks, Walland had hunted Jack through the streets of Doskvol, setting traps and tightening the noose with every passing day. And now, they had both walked into the same battlefield. But Harry saw something else. An opportunity. He clenched his jaw, summoning every ounce of power in his blood. The air hummed, thick with energy, his hands shaking as he reached into that deep, ancient well of something he barely understood. Then he called it forth. The ground trembled, and from the depths of the earth, a horror emerged. 10 heads. 10 arms. A monstrosity born of nightmare. It loomed over them all, a writhing mass of flesh and hunger, its many golden eyes scanning the battlefield before fixing its attention on Ishtar and Walland. Harry exhaled sharply. "Go," he whispered. And the beast charged. It moved with terrifying speed, a blur of teeth and claws, tearing through the soldiers like they were made of paper. Ishtar reacted immediately, drawing his blade, but it was too late. The monster engulfed him in shadow, sending him crashing into the rubble. Walland barely dodged in time, rolling away as the creature smashed through the wreckage of the carriage, its limbs lashing out at Harlequina, catching her off guard. She spun, her knives flashing as she struck at the beast, but it wasn't enough. Harry felt his grip slipping. The creature thrashed, its head snapping in different directions, its massive arms tearing through whatever stood in its way. Then, an echo in his mind. A foreign presence, one that did not belong. Harry turned, his gaze snapping toward the Dovakian. The bounty hunter stood still, his hands weaving ancient sigils, his lips moving in a low, resonant chant. Harry gritted his teeth. He was fighting for control. The two locked eyes. Then the battle began. The beast shuddered, its form splitting between masters, lurching back and forth like a puppet with two hands pulling its strings. Harry dug deep, forcing his will into the beast, commanding it, demanding it. But the Dovakian pushed back. It was a battle not of blades, but of minds. While chaos unfolded, Jack saw his chance. Bruce Walland, distracted, exposed. Jack moved. Sliding through the wreckage like a shadow, he closed the distance. Walland turned, just as Jack's blade pressed against his throat. Jack's voice was cold. "Stop," he ordered. "You come with me." Walland's lips curled. "You think I'd surrender?" Jack tightened his grip, pressing the blade harder. "You don't have a choice." Walland's smile widened. Then, with a casual flick of his wrist, he pulled 2 grenades from his coat. Jack's heart stopped. Walland held them open-palmed, the pins already loosened, his thumb resting lightly over the triggers. "I'd rather die," Walland whispered. His voice was calm. "Final." Jack's grip wavered, a single thought hammering in his skull. "This bastard really means it." Rabbitfoot's breath came fast and hard, his body locked in the heat of battle, when he caught sight of Jack and Walland. His stomach turned ice-cold. Jack's knife was pressed to Walland's throat, but the bounty hunter wasn't scared, he was grinning. Then Rabbit saw it. The grenades in Walland's hands. Pins loose. Jack was about to die. There was no time to think. Rabbit moved. He reached into his coat, his fingers closing around the small vial of rage essence he had carried today. He had been saving it for the right moment, and this was it. He bit the cork off and downed it in one gulp. The effect was instant. A burning heat coursed through his veins, like someone had set his blood on fire. His muscles coiled and tensed, his heart slammed against his ribs like a war drum, and in a single blink, everything slowed down. Jack was frozen in time, Walland's fingers tightening on the grenades. Rabbit exploded forward. Faster than a human had a right to move, he grabbed Jack by the collar and yanked him away, sending him tumbling out of Walland's reach. At the same time, Rabbit pulled a handful of grenades from his own belt. The fire-retardant foam grenades he had stolen from the Circle of Flame weeks ago. He wasn't sure how they worked. But he didn't need to be sure. He just needed them to work now. With a flick of his wrist, he threw them directly at Walland. The grenades burst on impact, spewing thick, viscous foam that instantly expanded, covering Walland's entire body. He let out a muffled shout, struggling as the foam hardened like stone, encasing him in an airtight, suffocating prison. For a moment, the battlefield stilled. Then, boom. The foam detonated from the inside, spraying burning flesh, red mist, and shattered bone across the ground. The explosion was sickening, the force knocking Rabbit backward as a rain of blood soaked into the dirt. Walland was dead. And with that death came the real nightmare. A deep, unnatural howl echoed in the air, like a bell ringing through the veil between the living and the dead. The Espiritas had been summoned. They were coming. The first sign was the screech of iron-rimmed wheels on stone. Then the heavy, thunderous pounding of hooves. The Espiritas arrived in carriages, their black lacquered surfaces gleaming under the flickering street lamps. Symbols of warding were etched into their steel-reinforced doors, glowing faintly with the crackling pulse of electroplasm. The carriages didn't slow, they came with a speed that was unnatural, their drivers faceless figures in black, barely distinguishable from the night itself. The first carriage slid to a stop so sharply that sparks flew from the cobblestones. Then the doors burst open. The Espiritas emerged like specters, their uniforms a grim fusion of law and death itself. They were clad in long, black coats, fastened high at the throat, with silver clasps in the shape of stylized ravens. Their masks resembled the plague doctors of old, elongated and avian, their hollow glass eyes shimmering with the faint, unnatural glow of ghost-sight lenses. The dark fabric of their coats was embroidered with tiny, intricate runes, wards of protection against the restless dead. Each one carried a baton, its shaft coated in shimmering electroplasmic energy, the hum of static filling the air as they approached. The moment they stepped onto the battlefield, the fighting stopped. Not by choice, but because the Espiritas did not allow fights to continue once they had arrived. The first to move was a guard who had drawn his blade against Rabbit, hoping to strike him down while he was still disoriented. The Espirita didn't hesitate. With inhuman speed, the officer crossed the distance between them and slammed his baton into the guard's side. The weapon let out a sharp, crackling explosion of energy, and the bounty hunter convulsed violently before dropping like a rag doll. The second officer moved before his partner had even finished, kicking a rifle out of a mercenary's hands and then bringing his baton down onto the man's chest. The moment the weapon made contact, the mercenary screamed, as if his very soul had been momentarily ripped from his body. Jack turned, his fury raw in his eyes. He had wanted Marik Ishtar's head, but now that was impossible. The Espiritas had him now, shielding him from attack, pushing back against anyone who dared step too close. Rabbit clenched his fists, still reeling from the rage essence's aftereffects. He could feel the heat leaving his limbs, his body aching from the unnatural boost. The battle was over. There was no winning this. Jack turned toward Rabbit, his jaw clenched. "We can't fight them." "We won't," Rabbit said. Jack scowled. "You got a plan?" Rabbit nodded. "Yeah." Jack sighed, shaking his head. "I hate when you say that." A moment later, the Espiritas took them. They were bound, their weapons confiscated, and dragged to the prisons of Doskvol for interrogation. For days, they were questioned. For days, the Espiritas tried to break them. But Rabbit Foot had planned for this. When the guards finally allowed him his one request, he took it. A phone call. Not to an ally. Not to a fellow gang member. To Cosine, the politician that he and Harry had cultivated connections with. A man who knew how to shift the story in the right direction. And shift it he did. Days later, the Crows walked free, their names wiped clean from the records of the Espiritas. Instead, the attack was pinned on Marik Ishtar himself. His attempt on Cross Daava had become public knowledge, and the scandal destroyed his campaign overnight. By the time voting day came, Doskvol had no candidates left for governor. For the first time in history, the city was left in political ruin, a leaderless kingdom of thieves, murderers, and aristocrats all vying for the throne. And in the shadows, the Crows watched it all burn.